Well, the Sooners are set to open their 2022 campaign the exact same way they opened their national title run in 2000 and the same way they opened the Lincoln Riley era back in 2017, and that is a home tilt with UTEP. It'll mark Brent Venables' first game as head coach since returning to Oklahoma after a decade-long stint as the defensive coordinator at Clemson. And to preview the Sooners season opener against the Miners of the University of Texas, El Paso, we welcome in Colin Deaver, sports director at KTSM TV out in El Paso, does a fantastic job covering UTEP as well as New Mexico State. And Colin, I guess the natural place to start here is, although you're in El Paso these days, you do have an Oklahoma connection, I understand.
That's right. My first job out of college was in Lawton, Oklahoma at KSWO as the weekend sports anchor there from August 2013 to June of 2015, covering it was mainly covering high school, a little bit of a lot of Cameron University too. And then we'd make the road trip up to OU and Oklahoma State for stuff as well, Thunder games. And it was an awesome 2 years. I know Lawton gets a little bit of a bad rap nationally and statewide, but I really enjoyed it there. I still have a lot of friends that live there that I talk to quite a bit. Now that I'm not covering the teams, I have obviously a soft spot for the Ike Eagles, the Mac Highlanders, and Lawton High Wolverines. So no, it was a good 2 years, and so definitely a part of my life I cherish.
Let's talk about these Miners, Colin. The last time the Sooners saw them at Owen Field in Norman was back in 2017, as I mentioned off the top. Yeah. The program went winless that year, but in 2021, you rewind one season here, they had a fantastic year, played in a bowl game. It's really been a drastic turnaround in the half decade since these two teams met up last time. What more than anything else do you chalk that up to?
Well, I think 2017 you had to go back to. That was the last year under Sean Kugler. When they went 0-12 in 2017, Kugler was actually fired midway through that season, and the coach that he had replaced about 4 years earlier, Mike Price, came back and coached the final 4 or 5 games of that season at UTEP. So a very, very tough and difficult, interesting season, that 2017 year. After that year, Dana Dimmel came in. He was the offensive coordinator for years under Bill Snyder at Kansas State, helped them almost play for the national championship in 2012 when Colin Klein was the quarterback at Kansas State. And, Dimmel, he's relished the rebuild that UTEP has been 1-11 in 2018, 1-11 in 2019, 2020, the COVID year, they go 3-5. And then you go over last year, making the bowl game for the first time since 2014. And really, it's just been this every single year, stacking success, just getting a little bit better each and every year. It's been a very slow process to get to this point, but I would really attribute it to Dimmel's, to quote Joel Embiid here, trust the process kind of style of coaching. It's UTEP. It's hard to get recruits in here the way that even other group of 5 teams do. It's out on an island. They've really hit the junior college level very hard the last couple of years. They recruited out of California, obviously Texas. Houston, they're probably their most talented players out of the Houston area. But yeah, it's just been kind of the gradual rise of, hey, let's get better this year. Hey, we won 1 game last year. Let's try to get 3. We won 3 last year. Let's try to go to a bowl game this year. And this year, the next step is to continue the run of success from a season ago. Obviously, it didn't start out the way they wanted to with the week 0 loss to North Texas, and it's going to be tough at number 9 Oklahoma this week. But the overall trend of this team is that they are on an upward trajectory heading into the season, and I still do think that's going to continue.
Now, how much of the Miners' success a season ago, as well as their expectations heading into this 2022 campaign, can be traced back to the play of quarterback Gavin Hardison?
I think quite a bit of it. When he was playing well, they were playing well. 18 touchdowns last year, over 3,000 yards passing, but he was fairly turnover prone a season ago. 13 interceptions. I think it was 3 lost fumbles for Gavin, including in the bowl game versus Fresno State. They were driving to tie the game with under 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. He was scrambling out of the pocket and fumbled it. Fresno recovers, and that's basically the ball game. So he worked a lot in the offseason about taking care of the football. Did a pretty good job of it last Saturday. There were some issues that weren't necessarily his fault. A receiver dropped a touchdown pass where there was a guy within 15 yards of him. They had 4th and goal from the 1 yard line. Snap goes over his head and they don't score. So there were some reasons kind of out of his control for what happened on Saturday. But I mean, he's the key to this entire season. If he plays well, if he has a good year, then I think UTEP is going to go back to a bowl game. If he doesn't, then it could be difficult.
Now, for those unfamiliar with UTEP's program and some of the standouts around which this entire team revolves, talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball. Who's the key cog? Who's the one guy that kind of is the straw that stirs the drink for the Miners defense?
Well, their defensive line brought back all 4 starters from a season ago. It's a unit that I think could be one of the best, if not the best, in Conference USA. Their defensive end, one of their 2 defensive ends, is a guy named Praise Mehule. He's out of the Houston area, I think Katy. I think he will have a shot at the NFL. Prototypical, like kind of edge rusher nowadays, like 6'3", 260, really like 6'10", 6'11" wingspan. I mean, and fast. I mean, he gets off the ball. He looks like a guy who could play at a Power 5 school. And so he will cause some issues. He caused some issues on Saturday, recovered a fumble. They largely schemed. North Texas was largely able to scheme the defensive line out of it, and kind of feed on a inexperienced linebacker core and an inexperienced defensive backfield. But if UTEP is able to generate some pressure, if Mehule is able to get to Dylan Gabriel on Saturday, I mean that's certainly the scenario, or one of many scenarios where I think UTEP will have to have happen to win this game or be competitive. But one of them is that Mehule will need to have a big game and get after Gabriel a little bit.
Now, you mentioned the contest against North Texas, and I understand that coming out of that contest, there were several members of the UTEP team that were a little bit banged up heading into the game week against Oklahoma. So what does the injury report look like as far as what you know right now? Who's available, who's unavailable for UTEP this Saturday?
I think it's going to look a lot like, for the most part, what they had last week. Their linebacker, their leading tackler from a year ago is a guy named Breon Hayward. He's not injured. He is trying to get a waiver for a 6th year of eligibility from the NCAA. And the process has dragged on basically since April. And he still has not received a waiver from the NCAA. He hasn't been able to practice all of fall camp because of it. So he's not listed on the depth chart. I don't expect Breon Hayward to play. So again, as long as that continues going, I mean, that is a huge loss for UTEP. Again, their leading tackler from a season ago. There's another linebacker, Gary Feard, who had been with the ones all of fall camp. He didn't play at all on Saturday. Was in a walking boot. Isn't on the depth chart again. I wouldn't imagine that he plays, and if he does, it'd probably be at a limited capacity. And then at the cornerback position, another guy, Torrey Richardson, didn't play last week. I don't expect him to play this week. So it's more or less. I mean, I would say it's basically those 3 guys, which everybody knows about anyways. I don't think there's any new guys, but obviously anything can happen, throughout the week of practice. So we'll see. But I think for the most part, you're going to see UTEP look about like what they did on Saturday.
Colin Deaver, sports director at KTSM TV in El Paso, covering the UTEP Miners. Colin, fill in the blank for me. If there's one thing UTEP does best, it's what?
I think it's throw the football, which is really weird to say for Dana Dimel, Kansas State offense. You think of Dana Dimel and the offense that Kansas State run for years. I mean, it was run heavy, and they did not run the football well at all. On Saturday, their biggest runs was a quarterback draw from Artisan and then an end around from a wide receiver. And they just couldn't run the football, which was frankly stunning because they, coming into the year, we were pretty confident that their 2 running backs, Deion Hankins and Ronald Awat, would have decent years. And they combined for, I'm trying to do some quick math here, 63 yards on the ground on Saturday at the running back position. So the strength is in Hardison. He's got a rocket for an arm. I've seen him throw the ball 75 yards down the field. I mean, he can really throw the ball. It's just the it's receivers were dropping a bunch of passes on Saturday. So, I mean, if that happens, obviously you're going to struggle to move the ball. And then just him, taking care of the football. But I would say the passing game, most teams want to use the run, set up the pass. I mean, UTEP might need to use the pass to set up the run this year.
Now, from the perspective of somebody who covers college football, but is on the outside as it pertains to Oklahoma specifically, what is your overarching thought on this team and the new era of football that is going to arrive in Norman this Saturday under Brent Venables? What do you think, just based on what you've picked up throughout the offseason, following the sport, following the national voices, and following some of the things that have been said about this team throughout fall camp? What are your thoughts on where Oklahoma stands as a program heading into the 2022 season under a first-year head coach?
I mean, obviously picked to win the Big 12, right? So, I mean, I'm not expecting much of a drop-off from where they've been in previous years, but certainly anytime you bring in a new coach, there's question marks. Venables has been around, clearly an incredibly successful defensive coordinator, both when he was back at Oklahoma and then winning national championships at Clemson. I mean, I think their defense, you would think would be improved, right? With a guy like that coming in, and then losing the quarterbacks they did in the offseason to still get Dylan Gabriel from Central Florida. I mean, that's as good of a, quote unquote free agent quarterback as you're going to get on the market with a lot of experience playing at the college level and at a high level. So I think they're going to be all right. And that's my outsider's take. They should throw the ball to Brian Darby. I can tell you that. I covered him in high school back in College Station. So give the ball to Brian Darby. Maybe some good things will happen. But no, I think they'll be all right. And I don't think they're gonna. I don't expect them to struggle with UTEP this weekend. I don't think that's really a hot take. Maybe for a quarter and a half, UTEP's able to hang around. But I think this is going to end up being the type of game that you would expect a UTEP Oklahoma game to be. And then, however good Oklahoma ends up being by the end of the year is just going to all depend on how Venables is able to kind of get his style and his system to gel as quickly as possible.
All right. Well, on that note, before we let you go, give us a score prediction for this weekend. How do you think this unfolds?
I think the spread is 31.5 right now. Oklahoma's favored. I think that's fair. I'll say 48-14 Oklahoma.
Colin Deaver, sports director, KTSM TV in El Paso, covering UTEP. Colin, thanks so much for your time, and we'll look forward to the game this Saturday.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Parker.